Hello everyone, this is going to be a bit of a ramble and a response to a number of videos that have been put out on YouTube in the last week. In particular, one channel which probably won't have a very high profile amongst you, but I'd like to give a shout out to him and also tell him publicly how much I appreciate his remarks and comments in his recent videos. It's a channel called Zen Miniature Painting. He's only got about 350 subscribers, so many of you won't be necessarily aware of him. And he's a chap, he's been off, it's a long-standing channel, but he's been off air, as it were, for quite a while. Only came back to uploading videos about 6 months or so ago, and I can really recommend that you watch that video that he put up explaining where he'd been and what he'd been up to. It's a really insightful look at the problems that he encountered when he emigrated to the States, the difficulties he had to overcome, and how thankfully he's now settled in a location that is where he and his wife are very content, and his life is back on the rails and looking good, so I wish him all the best. But he has been a viewer of my channel, a subscriber to my channel for a long time, and I'd never really realised how much he enjoyed my content. I know a lot of you do and leave comments when it was possible to leave comments on my channel. But he has actually been commenting on his videos about how much he values my content and enjoys what I do, and he seems to kind of have an understanding of what I'm trying to do on my channel as well, which is really kind of important to me. But anyway, recently I put up a channel update and a wargaming and channel update video, and in it I kind of remarked on how I felt YouTube had changed and how my viewing habits on YouTube were changing correspondingly, and it was really all down to the issue of monetization. I monetize my channel, but very reluctantly and minimally, so it's the adverts are as unintrusive as I can possibly get them, and I do that very reluctantly because some time back now YouTube announced that they were going to claim the right to monetize all content on YouTube, whether the channel owner wished their content to be monetized or not. And so by monetizing my own channel, it allowed me to control where the adverts went and so on, so it gave me some control over it. But you know, I absolutely loathe seeing adverts on YouTube. I'll get on to the subject of what's been called eBegging later, but even the sort of you know, even the sort of routine adverts really annoy me, and I've stopped watching a lot of channels now simply because I find the adverts so intrusive. So I wanted to talk a little about what I want my channel, you know, to be, just to reiterate that. But after I put this video out, I noticed that there were a couple of the sort of top league wargaming channels, so they won't mind me mentioning their names, Von Ketteringham and Leon T66, both put out videos on the subject of monetization and so on. And my own conceit, I must admit now, because I only just watched them this morning. My own conceit was that they had watched my video and were responding to that in a negative way, and that's all to do, as I say, partly with my conceit that I imagine that everybody out there is tripping over themselves to watch my videos, which of course they're not, and B, that it's sort of partly my paranoia that I feel that everybody out there is out there to get me and to be negative about my videos, even though, as I say, they're not. But I just, in the past, by rambling and by expressing my opinions, it seems to attract a lot of negative comments and dislikes and so on. So I just assumed that VK and Leon were responding to my own comments negatively, but as it turns out, watching their videos today, it seems that their opinions more or less coincide with mine. But Zen Miniature Painting, I was about to go to bed last night. I stayed up quite late anyway, and just was switching my laptop off and noticed he'd put up an hour long sort of rambling video, and I started to watch it and couldn't switch it off in the end, but he mentioned, so I stayed up another hour watching his video and felt that in the morning when I got up I would have to make this video in response primarily to that one. But he was talking quite profoundly about his own attitude to the wargaming hobby and to YouTube in general, and his thoughts on monetization. And go and watch it. I won't sort of spoil your viewing of it too much by preempting what he has to say. But his attitude to wargaming is he treats it. He calls his channel Zen Miniature Wargaming after the novel Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and it's really just it was really saying that there is a zen to being absorbed in painting figures and the meditative influences that just concentrating on a task like painting miniatures, can the influence that can have on you, and the sort of therapeutic effects, which I fully agree with. And I know a lot of you have made comments in the past on your own videos about how restorative concentrating on painting miniatures can be. But he did reference again this video that I had put up on monetization, and he was talking about his own attitude to monetization, which again coincides with mine. So as I say, I wanted just to make this video to talk a little bit about what I want my channel to be. And the reason I got these two objects out here, first of all, this one, the DVD of a BBC 3-part series that was on back, I think it was 2004, 2005, called The Lost World of Michelin Canyon. And this TV series really affected me when it came out, because Michelin Canyon were filmmakers at the very beginning of the 20th century, the Edwardian period, and the period prior to the First World War, and their profession was to go to industrial towns, factory towns in the north of England and the Midlands, and to seaside resorts where, such as Blackpool or places like that, where crowds would gather for summer holidays and so on, and just to film the streets and film the crowds, film the crowds as they left the factories at the end of their shifts, or film them as this image here is of people just walking along the promenades on beaches and so on. And then they would hand out cards to the crowd and say, tonight or this weekend, we will be putting on a show of all the reels of film that we've taken at a particular place. It might be a circus tent, or it might be a theatre somewhere. Come along and see yourself on film, which of course back in the days before moving photography was really established, that was a great draw to the crowd. So they would go and be entertained by watching themselves on film, and they made quite a good living out of it. But eventually, all their films ended up just being piled up in the basement of a shop. I think it was in Blackburn. It was in Blackburn, basement of a local shop in Blackburn. And they were the really old sort of rolls of nitrate film in barrels, and the British Film Institute restored them all and then made this DVD, and it's absolutely fascinating watch, because it shows you images that you would not otherwise see. And in a way, that was why that was one of my kind of aims. I know this does sound very conceited again, but one of the things that I thought YouTube would be useful for would be as a kind of depository where people could leave images of their locality, or their opinions on issues of the time and so on, and that would be available for future generations. Whether it would be something they could tap into, and be a useful archive for historians. So to give you an example of that, I've recently started putting up drone footage, and one of the scenes in one of the little pieces that I put up, I was immediately struck watching it back when I first took it. If only there'd been a drone in the sky at this particular spot 200 years ago, in the days of Nelson's Navy. What a fantastic archival piece of material that would have been. And this particular shot has got in the distance you can see HMS Diamond, one of the Royal Navy's destroyers, really majestically sailing out of the mouth of the river Tamar into Plymouth Sound. And if that image were miraculously to be staved somehow on YouTube, and someone, a historian, came across it in a couple of 100 years' time, then what a great little piece of illustrative material they would have for whatever account they were trying to say. But anyway, that was kind of my conceited kind of hope for some of the content on my channel, my images of Dartmoor, my kind of expression of sort of my thoughts on current events and all this kind of thing. But of course, you know, in the modern age, the, the internet is just swamped, absolutely swamped by material, by posts and by videos and, you know, tweets and all kinds of things, and it's just a clamour. You know, there is absolutely no way that that historians in the future would be able to find it in the way that this was uncovered. But there is a proviso to that, in that in the future, artificial intelligence is really going to do those kind of tasks for us, and it will be possible for artificial intelligence to sift through far more data far more quickly and pick up on images like that. So there is hope that all of our kind of efforts might be of use in the future. But yeah, the very first. So I never had an interest in making money out of my channel, and never monetized it until it got to the point where YouTube were going to monetize it anyway. And then I thought, well, I might as well monetize my channel and then have control over the content. So in that respect, I kind of agree with what Leon was saying, if you watch his video on the subject of monetization. But I do disagree with him as well in a lot of things. And I was really surprised watching VK's video that there were no adverts in it. I'd always imagined that VK probably did monetize his channel, but I was never aware of adverts, because up until recently I was able to use AdBlock, and it's only since I've not been able to use AdBlock that I've started noticing the videos, and it's being turned off of a lot of channels. So I was surprised this morning to see that VK doesn't have adverts on his channel, and I'm surprised for two reasons. One is that he's a very kind of successful channel, so I'd always thought that he was making a little bit of money from his success, but also because he gets so many views, YouTube are going to notice that anyway and put adverts on his channel whether he wants them there or not. So I think the reason this particular video, his response to what it turned out, he was responding not to my video negatively, but to a video that the terrain tutor put out, where the terrain tutor was literally begging for money. It was, you know, apparently, I haven't watched the video, but apparently it was cringeworthy. And he was responding to that. But because the title of his video and so on didn't mention any sort of clickbait type of wording, such as, you know, wargaming the Vietnam War or something like that, which he could have been, because he was showing wargame figures from the Vietnam War, or black powder, or oh, I don't know, muskets and tomahawks or whatever. It didn't mention any of that, so the algorithms hadn't picked up on the potentiality for advertising on his video. So I think basically, Fraser, if you do watch this video, I think you should monetize it like I do, simply so that you can eliminate unwanted adverts on your channel. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but by placing adverts on your channel where you want them to be and making them skippable, you can prevent YouTube putting in an advert right in the middle of a really interesting video you're making and distracting the viewers from what you're trying to say and show them. So I kind of agree and disagree both with VK and with Leon, but for different reasons. In Leon's case, I really kind of disagree with what he says about most people might as well make money out of their videos, because what they do is not only make money, make a little bit of money by placing adverts in their videos that can be skippable, say, but they deliberately, and it is a deliberate choice once they monetize their channels, they deliberately make the adverts at the beginning or the end of their channel non-skippable. So if you want to watch their video, you have to watch the advert. And also they deliberately place adverts in the middle of their videos, which you might be able to skip, but you have to make an active movement and choice to skip that advert. So they are doing more than they need to do, and they are making more money that they say they don't want anyway, than they necessarily could get out of the advertising that people do watch on their channels. So most of the people that you listen to who say, "Oh, I only put adverts on because YouTube are going to do it anyway," are being a little bit disingenuous, because they could reduce the amount of advertising that their viewers see. So why don't they do that? So I think there is a little bit of hypocrisy in that as well. Yeah, so in a minute I wanted to basically, as I mentioned to Zen Miniature Painting in a comment that I put, many years ago, back in the late 70s, early 80s, I did work in the advertising industry for my sins, and they were sins. I mean, I really regret the person I became when I was working in advertising. It was a very nasty industry at a nasty time in our society's history. So I won't go into all the ills of society back then, but you will be aware if you keep up with current events now and the changes that the younger generations are bringing to the world, that back then it was a world of misogyny and racism and political bad politics, all that kind of thing, and I was as much a part of that world as everybody else, and I've really tried to change the person I was then ever since I left. But anyway, I still kind of take a sort of a professional, as it were, interest in the advertising that appears on YouTube, the type of advertising, the thinking that would have gone behind the length of the adverts, the target audiences, and so on. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but before I do that, I had this 3D printed tree out on the desk as well, and I wanted to use this just as a kind of visual aid to what I'm going to talk about first of all, which is how things evolve and grow and change, because Fraser made a very interesting remark on his response this morning, that all things change, nothing ever remains the same, and he was making that remark in regard to how YouTube has changed since he started making his own channel. But I want to kind of broaden that statement and talk a little bit about evolution. How things evolve, how everything evolves, not just the human species, but everything evolves. So systems evolve as well. As you may know, I'm very interested in complexity theory, and that has a lot to say about evolution and extinctions and so on. But an organisation will self-organized to a point by obeying various rules. So in the case of YouTube, you could say, well, one of the rules that people are obeying, either consciously or unconsciously, is the need to monetize their channels and make money from it. So we're all obeying that rule that YouTube have put down, that adverts will appear on YouTube regardless of whether you want them to be there or not. So we are kind of complying simply by putting content up. We are complying in whatever way we choose with that law, as it were. But systems evolve, and then the inevitable corollary of evolution is extinction. I know that sounds like a really weird statement to make. I mean, when we think of extinction, we think of a sort of classic example like the extinction of the dinosaurs, and we don't tend to think, we tend to think of dinosaurs having gone extinct because they didn't evolve, whereas the human race is evolving and has become super evolved, as it were, and therefore we will always be able to progress and evolve still further, and the future, there's an indefinite future of a constant kind of march of technology and a march out to the planets and the stars and so on. It's not actually the way evolution works. The more evolved you get, the more likely you are to go extinct. And the reason for that is because if a change in the environment that you that you're living in, that you inhabit, happens too quickly, then as a species you aren't able to evolve fast enough to keep up with that change, because evolution happens on a much slower rate, much slower pace than the environment or the world might change in. So a kind of an example of that would be that I have thought very seriously recently, because I am not enjoying the YouTube experience at all as much as I used to, of just ending my channel. So I could either just stop producing content and leave it there, or I could take the whole thing down. So my channel would have gone extinct because the environment, the world of YouTube that I inhabited, changed way too quickly for me, very suddenly, when I suddenly wasn't able to block the adverts on channels that I was watching, and because I lost the use of ad block, and my kind of experience of YouTube had changed completely. The reason I'm holding this, I swear I should get onto this tree and use it as a visual aid rather than just waving it in front of the camera. So you can imagine anything, a life form or a system, starting off from the base and growing, and as it grows, it doesn't have to make any choices for quite a long distance. It's just there's a single trunk, and it's following a route that absolutely every other inhabitant of that system is following. But then it suddenly starts to get to branches, and it has to make a decision about which way it's going to go. So it might, for instance, decide to go up this branch here, and as it goes up that branch, there are more and more chances, and so it's evolving, it's adapting, it's changing, until the point where it gets to the very tip of one particular branch and it can't go any further. Whereas something else that started with a shared likeness to it might have gone up a completely different branch and have a completely different life form by the time it gets there to over here. Now, one of the kind of this analogy doesn't work entirely well for everything that I want to try and describe, but one of the rules of this would be that you can't suddenly change your mind, turn around and go back. So once you get to a particular point, it might be possible for you to jump from one branch to another. So imagine that you were an insect, like an ant or something, climbing up, but you can never climb back down again for some peculiar reason. But it might be that you've got the strength and the ability to jump to an adjacent branch and take a different track and turn out slightly differently. But when you get so far, there's no way that you've got the strength or the ability to jump from there to there. And that's kind of known as an extinction peak. So you get to a certain point, you can't go any further, and you then just have to wait for, you know, the surroundings to change to the point that you can't adapt to them and you become extinct. So basically that is the way that evolution works. And it does mean that now we have got to a point where we are evolving, we are still evolving very slowly, but the most important change that has been made, you know, and it's happening at an alarming rate, is our reliance on technology and in particular artificial intelligence is taking over a lot of the tasks and the roles that we would have performed before, and it's allowing us to do those tasks far more efficiently, you know, not even to do the task but to leave artificial intelligence to do the task. But the danger, of course, is that should artificial intelligence fail us, or should a bad actor make use of artificial intelligence to the detriment of other people, then we are at great risk, which is why there's been a lot of topics in the news recently about scientists warning us about the dangers of AI, you know, and saying that we now need to, nations need to collaborate on methods of regulating and policing AI. But that takes me back to that point I was trying to make about the immense amount of data that is available, you know, out there now for future historians, and how it's only artificial intelligence that's going to be able to sift through all that data. Another good example, a current example, would be, and I've forgotten the name of the place in Egypt, basically an archaeological dig many years ago, decades ago, discovered what was the equivalent of the town's scrap heap, buried in the sand, and it's just a huge mass of fragments of parchments with legible writing on them, but everything fragmented, but preserved really well. The documents are about 2,000 years old, but everything from shopping lists down to fragments of manuscripts and books and so on, all there, all jumbled together. It's taking academicians years to go through it. It's the work of several lifetimes of hundreds of staff to try and piece all these fragments together and read what's on them, and a lot of interesting finds have been made, including sections of missing Gospels, for instance, and that kind of thing. AI could do that, you know, far more quickly, and probably there have been resources placed on doing that. But all it then requires is for the parchments to be digitized, which they are being. And again, that is a task that artificial intelligence robots could take over. So you don't even need a human input in that way. And then the artificial intelligence software could then read the sections and realize which part belongs, which part the jigsaw should be placed in which particular position and so on, and do it far more quickly. But anyway, enough of that. Let me go on to my kind of thoughts about advertising in general. And AI does come into this as well, which is why I wanted to talk about AI. It seems to me that advertising, it doesn't, the placement of adverts in media is totally different now from the way I used to do it when I worked in advertising. Back in my day, there were only two, well, to begin with, only one commercial channel. Channel 4 came into being towards the end of my brief career in advertising. But there was far more regulation on the type of adverts you could put on television, where you could put them, and how much you could put on. So, for instance, there were only 7 minutes of advertising allowed in any hour. Sorry, maybe not. Kind of contrast that with a 3-minute YouTube video that has 30 seconds of advert at beginning and end. You're not allowed to put adverts in YouTube. It's not possible to put adverts in YouTube videos that I think are in the middle of them if they're shorter than 8 minutes. But all the same, you could have about 30 seconds of advertising that the viewer isn't able to skip at the beginning of a 3-minute video. So there's a much higher proportion of advertising to content allowed than there used to be in my day on ITV. On top of that, there was a lot of regulation that you couldn't have competing products in the same commercial break. So you couldn't have two airline companies, for instance, both advertising in the same commercial break. You couldn't have the two perfumes advertising in the same commercial break. All that is changing, but it's not even. It doesn't even seem to be a consideration on YouTube at all now. But more importantly than that is the fact that in order to get value for money, because advertising was horrendously expensive, being a monopoly, ITV could more or less charge what they wanted, although it was ITV was just a license to print money when the channel first came into being and the franchises were issued. The whole of the country was broken up into about 13 different regions, and each region the companies would pitch to be the provider of programming and advertising revenue, advertising placement in those particular regions. But it was literally that once they got the franchise from the government, it lasted, I think, about 10 years each time, and then they had to rebid. But in that 10-year period, it was just a license to print money. But yeah, in order to get value for money, the advertiser had to take far more care in where the adverts were placed so that they reached their target audience. So there was absolutely no point in putting something like I don't know, trying to think now, but putting a totally inappropriate thing like a very kind of female product, such as a cosmetic, into a type of program that was going to get, well, would get female viewers, but it would have a very low profile of female viewers. The majority of the viewers would be male, or they would be of a certain age, for instance. So you would get a breakdown each week of the viewers for each particular program and the commercial breaks within that program, and it would break it down into what proportion of children watched it, what proportion of adults watched it, what proportion of men, women, you know, people over of a certain age, all that kind of thing. And you would then value the advert that you had placed by its cost per thousand viewers of your target audience. The idea, of course, was to get as low a cost per thousand as possible, but there then became it then became a matter of quality advertising. You know, that there was no point in getting a very cheap cost per thousand by spending a budget of, say, £500,000 on an advertising campaign that simply purchased very cheap off-peak adverts, you know, so like late night ad programming and so on. So there had a certain amount of quality had to come into your assessment of the results of the advertising campaign, and also it was a matter of how great a coverage of the entire target audience you reached, and also how many times each individual within that target audience who had seen your advert, how many times they had seen it. Because a lot of adverts, if you only saw an advert once, it wouldn't have a particular impact on you, but the impact of the advertising would be reinforced if you saw it 3 or 4 times. But then over that, then again you began to waste money, so you were better off concentrating on improving the coverage, getting more of the target audience rather than getting a greater frequency of the people that you had already covered. So yeah, that's a bit waffly. I didn't explain that very well, but not, what I'm trying to say about advertising on YouTube is that none of that seems to be apparent to me. I mean, I've watched my own videos on YouTube. I do that sometimes just to make sure that there's not a glitch on them or something like that. And I've seen adverts, you know, on my channel, my wargaming content, you know, advertising Estee Lauder or something like that. Now, you know, we all know that there is a very small proportion of female wargamers, so it's highly unlikely that Estee Lauder advert on my channel would have been seen by anyone who would be interested in buying Estee Lauder's products, that is. But that doesn't seem to matter now, because I'm sure, because it is such a huge world of you know, the media world is just expanded so much, and there's so many places, so many TV channels, there's so many YouTube channels, there's so much advertising on other platforms like Facebook, or I don't know whether, I think there are adverts on Facebook and Twitter. You know, it's just absolutely impossible for someone to do the job that I used to do, which is to sit down and decide where adverts would go. So I think that must be being done now more using algorithms and using artificial intelligence. And the problem with that is that it's very crude at the moment. The algorithms are extremely crude, and also I think they're corrupted. A video that I put up recently, what I always do is I put it private. I put my videos up so that they're private and can't be viewed by anyone until I check that they're okay. You know, it might just be that check that the thumbnail that it's chosen, it looks all right or something like that, and then I will publish it. But I put one up recently where within 6 seconds of me publishing it and going to look at it on YouTube, someone had liked it. Wasn't me, I hadn't liked it. There's absolutely no possibility that a human agent had actually liked that video. It must have been done you know, by some kind of algorithm or artificial intelligence or a bot. So that bot was working as the audience rather than as the promoter of my video. So in other words, the artificial intelligence is not only placing the adverts, but it's watching it and creating its own corrupted viewing figures. So I don't think audiences and the number of likes and dislikes and the number of subscribers, definitely, I've always thought this, that there is a lot of bogus subscription levels, because it's artificial intelligence creating the viewers as well as the viewing. Yeah, so I think now it doesn't matter, because the volume is so huge that you can just throw adverts out there. So it's become very kind of cheap and corrupted, and it's sort of lessened the whole YouTube experience, because not only is it annoying to watch adverts, it's annoying to watch adverts that you're not interested in buying the product. You know, I do sometimes stop and watch a video because sometimes I think, oh yeah, that looks interesting. I might want to go on that holiday, or I might want to buy that video game or something like that. So I will watch it. So that is good advertising, good placement. But it doesn't seem to be, to my mind, something that is a factor in YouTube's mind or the advertising industry's mind any longer. So I just thought I'd share that with you. But I forgot earlier also to talk about eBegging, which is an extension of kind of the whole commercialization process of the YouTube channels. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. With Fraser than I couldn't agree any more with Fraser than what he said. Which is it's totally unnecessary. Asking for Patreons, asking for tips. It's ridiculous, absolutely absurd. And I disagree with Leon in that respect, because he's saying, well, what harm does it do? If people want to give money, then, it doesn't matter. It's no skin off anyone's nose. But it does kind of it makes the whole thing even worse than it is already. It makes it more sordid than it is already. And to get back to my first steps into YouTube, it's going to be very difficult to say this without identifying the YouTube owner, but I'll try not to. But I got the idea of making a YouTube channel off of someone that I knew, and he still has a YouTube channel. I watch very little of it nowadays, and long ago stopped subscribing to it. But he absolutely goes hell for leather. Having given me the inspiration to start my own YouTube channel with my own sort of criteria for what I wanted to do, he seems to have completely the opposite attitude to YouTube than I do. He's got a lot of subscribers, a lot more than me, and his subscription levels, I do kind of keep looking at them, grow faster than mine grow, and yet the content on his channel is regular and frequent, but of absolutely no substance whatsoever. I haven't seen him put a video up in years that actually dealt with a subject or did anything other than him waffling in front of the camera, on completely trivial matters, and he's moved away from the small amount of wargaming that he used to do to, well, it's still wargaming, but it's not what I call wargaming, and he's moved away from that. He's moved away from historical wargaming, definitely, but his content has not only changed, but it's become blander and more pulpy than ever, and yet he has adverts at the beginning and end, and every 7 or 8 minutes inside his content. But on top of that, he's very keen to press people to subscribe to him on Patreon and so on, and he makes content specifically for Patreons, and yet he's only got 4 Patreons. He used to have 5, he's only got 4, and one of those, I'm pretty sure, is his wife. Otherwise it's a bit of a coincidence that this Patreon has got the same name as his wife. So it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. And I don't think he watches my videos any longer, and you probably won't, unless you followed me a very long time, you probably won't know who I'm talking about, but I've tried my best not to identify that particular person, but I don't know why I'm trying, because I find his channel kind of insulting to me, so I don't see why I should refrain from being impolite, but I am going to refrain. But yeah, I think there is a place for Patreon, but it's not, to patronise YouTube channels. I recently became a patron of someone who isn't a YouTube uploader at all, or in one respect, but he's a musician. His name is Scott Buckley, and I discovered his work from watching a particular piece of drone footage where someone had used his music as a background to their drone footage, and I've started using it as well, because it's, as long as you give him an attribution, his music is completely free, and unlike the music that you get free on YouTube, and you can subscribe to providers as well outside of YouTube, and then use their music. But unlike the stuff you can get on YouTube, it's actually not bad music, and it doesn't have to be. You don't want the music to be a distraction. You don't want it to be the main point of your video. You want something that will fill the gap of the kind of absence of noise, as it were, but also supplement the images that you're trying to show with your drone footage. So it's absolutely ideal for that. But he doesn't ask for any payments or anything at all. He admits it's not a very good business model, but he does give you the opportunity to become a Patreon of his work. So I thought, I'm going to do that, because this is a valuable thing that he's offering, and if everybody just gives him £1 a month, then he's going to make a little bit of a living from it. And you know, all the best to him. You know, so his name, I think I said, was Scott Buckley. I'll, you know, show you the web page for his work in case any of the others of you are looking for music to put as backdrop to your content as well. It tends to be more, it's very relaxing kind of ambient type music, so a lot of it wouldn't be suitable for something like battle reports or something like that. But if any of you are putting up things like I do of you know, images of the countryside or drone footage, then take a look at it. Okay, that must have gone on for a very long time, so I'll stop there. Didn't intend making this video today, but I woke up, you know, I went to bed late and then woke up quite early in the morning with it all running, the issues running through my mind. So I wanted to do it today because I'm going away for a while now, so, and I won't be on the net. You know, I won't be looking at the internet while I'm away, and wanted to do it while it was kind of fresh in my mind. So thanks for watching, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.